Okay, so this is chapter 3, and this sort of goes nicely with the last chapter. We're still talking about meaning and how meanings are formed in your mind. And so it's called narrative as a formal system. The thing to remember is that not all films are narrative. And this particular chapter examines how different elements work together to unfold a story and create meaning. Generally, when people think of film and they think of going to the movies or whatever, they think of narrative films, films that tell a story. And most Hollywood films, animation, a lot of animation, many documentaries, tell stories. However, there are other films out there that don't tell a story, or if they do, that's not their main goal. Those films are more like works of art, and we'll examine some of those towards the end of the semester. But I thought that I'd remind you that this particular chapter really is only talking about those films that tell stories, narrative films. That's what we call the films that tell stories. So we start out with a little vocabulary. These will discuss some words that you might think of as all the same thing. Those words are narrative, story, and plot, but they actually have different meanings in terms of this class. And we'll talk about how those terms differ, and we'll delve into some different ways of manipulating the concepts to engage the viewer. And so the next few slides are sort of like vocabulary. I really hope that you're not getting the Facebook post that just popped up in the middle of my recording this lecture. I really don't know a lot about how this software works. I'm afraid it's pretty lame, but I wanted to lecture capture and I wanted to include movie clips, and so I found this little app that lets me do that, but I honestly haven't troubleshot it very much. So anyway, whatever. So narrative, when we talk about narrative, the other thing that I wanted to warn you about is, a lot of these terms that we're about to discuss, narrative, story, and plot, you also talk about in English class. And I'm going to ask you to just forget all about everything you've learned about these terms before, because sometimes on a test, I'll ask about these terms and people will trot out the definition from like English class last semester or something. That's how I kind of know that you're BSing on your test, by the way. And it means something different in terms of that. These definitions, the whole reason that I go over them is because they're pretty specific. So narrative is defined as a chain of events in cause and effect relationship occurring in time and space. What do I mean? This is the stuff that you actually see on the screen. It doesn't include any events that you assume happened or events that you infer happened, things that are referred to but you didn't see. Okay? And then sometimes the book, just to confuse you even more, will use narrative as just a loose term for the general organization of the film. The really big minefield here is when I do ask about these on a test, sometimes you may get a question about it. And sometimes I get people who confuse the word narrative with narrator. And a narrator is something different. A narrator is like, outside the story sort of narrating, right? And it's totally different. And I know a huge group of you are rolling your eyes and groaning right now and going, who could possibly do that? But I'm telling you, I swear to the Lord that people do it every semester. It drives me crazy. And I don't know which one of you will do it, but one of you will probably. Okay, so narrative, again, stuff you see on. Okay, so I had to kind of go back and fix something here. I wanted to turn up the volume because the first time I tried to record this slide, it didn't work. Okay, so these guys are about to take an elevator ride. Watch this.
Do me a favor. Put on that sweet, innocent look you do so well and go to the desk and get the key at 796.
Don't ridiculous. I wouldn't do such a thing.
$10?
Not for all the money in the world.
50?
Roger, you are disgraceful.
Okay.
Drunk driving.
So here we've had a little dissolve. They went from the hotel lobby where he's bribing his mother to get the hotel key or whatever, and they've had a little jump to where they're about to go into the room 796, theoretically on the 7th floor, right? So they had an elevator ride in here. They had an elevator ride. Did you see it? No, you did not see it. So that is an inferred event. That event is not part of the narrative. That elevator ride is not part of the narrative. So what is it? Ha ha. Here, that's a good question, and I'm about to tell you. There's our that event. But right slide. Okay, so we're here with diegesis. Diegesis is a term for everything in the world of the story action. Okay, that's everything that the characters on the screen can hear and see. So, for example, if you see a bunch of characters in a bar and there is music and you see people dancing, then you can assume that the music you're hearing is the music they are hearing, and thus it is diegetic music. It is part of the story world, right? Music that is non-diegetic would be like when two characters have a big makeout scene, let's say on an empty beach or something, and things heat up, and then all of a sudden you're hearing like, violin music or something. Well, there could be a string quartet 5 feet away. There probably isn't. Probably you're the only one hearing the music, right? And that music was put in post-production, and the couple does not hear any of that. They may hear some beach sounds. That would be some diegetic sound that they might hear, that you might hear too, but they don't hear that music. That music is non-diegetic. Now, most people immediately think that music is the clearest example of diegesis, but in fact, it can include other elements. For example, the credits to a movie are usually non-diegetic. They are not something that the characters can see, hear, touch, smell, whatever. So usually they're non-diegetic. If you ever saw Pulp Fiction, Mia Wallace at one point tells Vincent not to be so square. When I go back, take a look at that. Oh, look, here's another Facebook post that you might or might not be seeing. Let's play this little thing. Let me show you this.
This is Jack Rabbit Slims. An Elvis man should love it.
Come on, man, let's go get a steak.
You can get a steak here, Daddy-O. Don't be a...
Okay. So you saw that she drew like a little square and we saw dotted lines. Did they see dotted lines? No. Did they hear the ting at the end? I don't know whether you heard that or not, but no, they probably did not hear that. So that was, all of that was non-diegetic. Sometimes I make you guys watch Pulp Fiction. I'm thinking about bringing it back this semester, actually. I'm going to scoot through. I don't know what happened because it is so good. And it turns out that a lot of young folks have not seen it. Now, here's another interesting example of diegesis right here. Let's play this scene from Blazing Saddles. Okay, so is that music diegetic or non-diegetic? You're probably saying non-diegetic, but get this, that's part of the gag. Okay, so clearly it was diegetic. Isn't that silly? That's the Count Basie Orchestra. So it turns out in this particular case, that the diegesis of this element is like that's the whole joke. I used to show this movie too. It is not politically correct at all, which is why it is it's pretty funny. But yeah, you can't show it. It's so politically incorrect that I think you can't show it anymore. I don't know. I once, I got yelled at by another instructor for showing it when I used to show it. So now I'm afraid to. Okay, here to story back. This is a slide. I was going to put in something here, a love scene. So this is supposed to stand for insert makeout scene, but I didn't find it. So yeah, it's just a blank slide. I don't know. Story consists of all the events in the narrative, both explicit and inferred. Okay? So that elevator ride is part of the story. It happened. Things could have happened during that elevator ride. They could have gotten off on the second floor and killed a bunch of people, right? And gotten back on, and you find out about it later. But you didn't see it. It's an inferred event. So it is not part of the narrative. It's part of the story. Okay, I'm going to go that I forgot to take out. All right, so back to story. We talked about the story, right? Plot and story. And I have no idea how this is recording. I think every time I go to a slide, it records like a second or two, and then the second I come back to that slide, it starts recording again. So I hope this is not too disjointed for you sitting at home looking at this lecture. But if it is, what can I do? It's over now. So story is all the events in the narrative, both explicit and inferred. All the stuff that you see, that's what I mean by explicit, and all of the stuff that you infer happens, right? So here is a little something from Alfred Hitchcock about horror and suspense, and it really plays on story, what you see and what you infer. Story can be manipulated many, many ways because it plays on a viewer's expectations. So let's watch this little clip.
The essential fact is, to get real suspense, you must let the audience have information. Now let's take the old-fashioned bomb theory. You and I are sitting talking, we'll say, about baseball. We're talking for 5 minutes. Suddenly a bomb goes off, and the audience have a 10-second terrible shock. Now, let's take the same situation. Tell the audience at the beginning that under the table, and show it to them, there's a bomb, and it's going to go off in 5 minutes. And we talk baseball. What do the audience do? They're saying, don't talk about baseball. There's a bomb under there. But they're helpless. They can't jump out of their seats up onto the screen and grab hold of the bomb and throw it out.
All right. So, and by the way, I stole that off of YouTube. Those are not my special effects and graphics on that video, believe me. So this has to do with how much information you give the audience, which can involve, what the audience infers happens, what the audience knows happens, what the audience sees, what they don't see. All of these things have to do with story and, to an extent, plot. Plot is everything visibly and audibly present in the film. It includes diegetic elements and non-diegetic elements, but it's everything that you see and hear, whether it's diegetic or non-diegetic. It does not include inferred events. So plot is like the whole enchilada except for the inferred events. And what some people often are confused by is, hey, why are things like credits, things that are non-diegetic, why are those considered part of plot, right? And I'm going to show you a little clip here. I may turn down the volume because it's a little much. Alright, these are credits to a film. And they are pretty gosh darned stylized, wouldn't you say? Like an acid trip, basically, going on here. If you're watching this at home, is this not giving you some feeling, some vibe for what the film is going to be like if you're watching this thing? Yes, I think it is. You were about to see something pretty bizarre, pretty psychedelic, right? Maybe something from the 60s. Maybe something, who knows? So, if the credits give you an impression of what the film coming at you is going to be like, then they are in fact affecting you, the viewer. They are affecting your understanding of the film, and they are part of the plot because they are creating basically meaning in some way, shape, or form. Now, when we talk about narrative form, we talk about cause and effect. Now let's watch this little scene. I'll turn up the volume again.
Trademark. Rot.
Roger O. Thornhill. What does the O stand?
Nothing.
Uh-oh. She's gonna blow his match out. By the way, in film, sort of like to give you like a little shorthand, anytime somebody lights somebody's cigarette, that's always considered like sexual. So just FYI, that's always sexy. And it happens all the time, you know, back in the days when people smoked, it would happen all the time in films. So that's a very sexy scene. Now, she remarks about his pack of matches there. Why do I bring that up? Because it is important later in the film. He signals her that he's near her by making sure she finds his pack of matches. And she knows that's his pack of matches because it has his initials on there, right? So that is very definitely a great example of cause and effect. You think it has no implication, but it does. Because North by Northwest is like a classic Hollywood film, very tight narrative. And basically, in any film, you know, the director only has you for a couple of hours. And they have to tell you a complete story. And so they don't waste a lot of time with showing you a pack of matches that means nothing. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, it always means something. So we'll pause here because I've split this lecture into two. They told me in, learn to teach class that today's young people don't have a very long attention span. So we'll stop right here.